here. If someone could give me a holler, a wave that you can see us, we will get this underway. Hi. My name. Hi. Thank you. So thanks so much to everyone for tuning in tonight. I am Beth Spotswood. I'm Alta Magazine's digital editor, and I am our resident true crime aficionado. One of the features that we actually have in every issue of Alta Magazine, which is this incredible quarterly publication you can join for just $24 a year, is a West Coast cold case. And in our current issue, the cold case is that of a San Francisco serial murderer known as the Doodler. This article right here was written by Zack Ruskin, one of tonight's guests. Hi, Zack.
Hello.
Zack is a journalist with bylines in lots and lots of important publications, most notably Alta. Our other guest tonight is Katherine Ellison. Katherine is a Pulitzer Prize winning journalist and author. Her book, Mothers and Murderers, A True Story of Love, Lies, Obsession, and Second Chances, is both a true crime story and a memoir, which is a sub-genre in true crime. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that tonight as well. Kathy, thank you for joining us.
Thanks. It's good to be here.
We're going to talk.
Hello.
I'm going to turn our mic down. Is there an echo? Hi from San Diego.
Someone has the stream playing on their computer.
Does anyone have the stream also playing on their computer?
No.
I do not. All right, I'm going to keep going. Okay. Yeah. Do you still hear it? We have a lot of streams going on simultaneously in the hopes that people from all over the place will watch this. But basically, there should be a button underneath us right now that says
Wow, what is that?
You hear it? Oh no. Okay, I'm just gonna keep going. I think it was Kathy's computer. She's restarting it. So while she does that, there should be a button right underneath us that says "Buy the Books." And Books Inc., who was our partner tonight and was intended to be our partner for a live event that we were having around this, has put together an incredible list of books, true crime books that you can buy and support them. Books Inc., like every other bookstore, is closed right now, so that buying a book from them would be a really great way to support them. I've got a little blurb that they'd like us to read. Books Inc. is incredibly fortunate to have a partner in Alta. Alta's continued support of independent bookstores has been invaluable, especially during these uncertain times. Books Inc. is the oldest bookseller on the West Coast, and we take pride in continuing to serve readers in any way we can. Again, if you can support them tonight, please do. It looks like Kathy's back. Our sound sounds gorgeous. Debbie's not seeing a link about books. Debbie, I will get that for you right now. Let's get this underway with our talk. First of all, the true crime genre seems to have enjoyed a surge. And I can kind of trace this back to Serial, a podcast. When did Serial come out? 5-6 years ago, that explored a murder case over a number of episodes. Kathy, why do you think that the true crime genre has grown in popularity in recent years?
Well, obviously, I've been thinking a lot about this coming up to tonight. And for me, at least, true crime is so addictive because you can see behind people's facades in a way that I don't think you can in any other way. When I was a reporter for the San Jose Mercury News on the court beat, it was like 2 of the most wonderful years of my career because people normally lie a lot, and there's nothing like a court case to get to the truth. And there's something so satisfying about that, about seeing that story and having a mystery or a secret or a hypocrisy, and then seeing the truth behind it. And the thing I love about true crime and just looking at all those, documents, arrest records, and trial transcripts is that they really nail people in a way that nothing else does.
What about you, Zack? You have to have noticed that true crime has exploded in recent years. Why has something changed in our culture? Are we different? Have we been through so much that now we love hearing about other people's horror? Do we think we can solve these? What's the attraction?
I mean, the hope of solving one is always paramount, although definitely not what you should be going into any of these reporting ventures hoping to do. But for me, I think in some ways it's just the access to the data that's changed. There's just so much more that we can pursue about so many quote unquote lesser figures that we may have previously relegated to the dustbin of history, that we can now, thanks to Google and 1,000 variations thereof, kind of pinpoint and really go back and look at or connect with the people who might have known that person to get an actual story,
right?
Of just like empirical data on a crime, which as we all know is really what seals the deal, because there's a crime itself, which is interesting, but the story of that crime and how it's told is what really makes true crime pop, for me at least.
All right, so while we're on you, Zack, can you tell us, I mean, I want everyone to get Alta and read your story, which is online right now. I will grab that link. Can you tell us about the Doodler? Briefly, give us a Doodler overview.
Yes, without spoiling anything that would lessen your interest in reading the full story available at Alta, I will say that what fascinated me about the Doodler, and I want to give credit where credit is due, there's a journalist named Elon Green, I believe he wrote about this for, I'm forgetting the publication, it was like online only, but he did this deep dive on this lesser known serial killer I was not familiar with at all. And what totally tripped me out was this very cutesy almost sounding name. The Doodler was paired with this person who in the mid 1970s, it was 74 to 75, killed at least 5 men, possibly many more. And part of his behavior was to potentially sketch them as a way to endear them to want to follow him to a secondary location. He preyed on gay men in the Castro area at a time when there was so much seclusion in the Castro compared to other districts of San Francisco, and just to be a gay person was to potentially be putting your life at risk anywhere, and there as well, where gay people were known to congregate, so they became a potential target demographic for this one killer. And what makes the story fascinating in a morbid and sad way is that there's reason to believe that at the time, the identity of this killer was determined, strongly alluded to, but because individuals who were in a position to name this person did not want to, by doing so, potentially out themselves as homosexual, they all refused to take part in any kind of official proceeding. And there's also some updates that go all the way to the present, which I will not detail for hope that you'll follow that yourself. But yeah, this is a story that started way back in kind of a weird heyday of serial killers and continues into this sort of new time frame when things like the Golden State Killer and 23andMe and DNA websites have reopened cold cases that we previously thought were never to be revisited.
Kathy, thank you, Zack. Everyone, again, I linked on the side over here. Am I pointing in the right direction? You can read Zack's article right there. So your book, Kathy, your book is a kind of a sweeping tale of, there's a lot more going on than just one murder, but can you narrow it down for us about the crime, that specific crime, that kind of was.
But I just want to say, I mean, thinking about what Zack was saying about the Doodler and sort of the relation to the times and what was going on then, I think one of the reasons I really got obsessed with this one crime that I covered very early in my career, and I think one of the reasons I was obsessed was that the woman at the center of it, whose name is Judy Singer, it was a time, just the earliest backlash against feminism. And she had not been charged. She was the wife of a defendant in a murder case. And she portrayed herself as the most upstanding mother, stay-at-home mother of 3, total womanhood, carpool driver. And there was something that just didn't smell right in the whole thing. She was a very powerful, very smart woman. And I think I was really intrigued in part because of the difference between us. I was a determined career woman, and she was very proud of being this, very perfect wife. And she was standing by her man, who was her second husband, who was standing trial for the murder of her first husband, in a story that absolutely could have been cast by the Coen brothers, because the guy who was standing trial was a restaurant owner who hired two goons from Michigan, one of whom was his dishwasher. I mean, think of that, hiring your dishwasher to do a contract murder. And these two guys drove out to Santa Clara, California, to shoot Judy's ex-husband at his townhouse door. And it was amazing that they almost got away with the murder, because they were just such screw-ups. I mean, they got lost on the way. They forgot to buy ammunition. The trigger man was high on LSD when he shot the victim. There are all sorts of really interesting twists and turns in this case.
It's a great book, and again, you can buy it over at Books Inc. right now.
Thank you.
So, one of the things that we focus on at Alta is West Coast, and I was thinking of the West Coast true crimes that have really people have latched onto: Zodiac, Manson, the Night Stalker, the original Night Stalker, later dubbed the Golden Gate Killer, who's been caught gloriously. Am I just a California girl deciding that everything interesting happens here, or is there something about the West Coast with really compelling, terrifying stories?
Well, you've heard that saying about how if they tilted the continent, all the loose screws would fall to the side.
You get the weirdo?
Loose screws? I don't know. We have, I think, probably more than our share of eccentrics and self-styled visionaries and people who are just a bit more exotic, it seems. What do you think, Zach?
Well, having been, as I'm sure many folks watching this have done the same, the recipient of a number of Netflix documentaries that are jumping into true crime, I tend to see this pattern, and it speaks specifically to the West Coast, whether in Wild Wild Country, about what happened up in Oregon, or several things you've referenced, which are local, basically, to San Francisco. I mean, Manson, was in Berkeley, San Francisco, of course. Zodiac. It seems to me that there's some fascinating moment in the 70s where some kind of like new age philosophies and sort of rejection of cultural norms allowed this vacuum in which serial killers were able to like fit their way in. And then, I mean, if you look now, there's no one right now that's doing what any of these folks did, at least that we're covering or
that we know of.
So, thank goodness. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. But it does feel like in researching and answering the question of why the time becomes so relevant, and even though a lot of coverage is happening now, I feel like inordinately it's still coverage about stuff that's already happened, less like more in the moderate to farther path than stuff that's like just happened in the last few years, with some notable exceptions.
Okay. We're going to get to, we have questions about podcasts. We're going to get to the docuseries, but let's focus on books tonight. I know that there was a book that Zach and I both wanted to discuss. I have my copy. I don't know if Zach has his.
I do, in the room next door.
The Sleeping Lady, The Trailside Murders Above the Golden Gate by Robert Graysmith. If you're not familiar with this book, you probably know Robert Graysmith for writing the Zodiac book that the movie was based, the Zodiac book we've all read. This case is particularly interesting to me because it's a Marin County, mostly Marin County, Northern California based case. My mom knew one of the victims, but I do not have the connection to the case that Zach does. Zach, can you tell us?
Yes. I do have a unique connection to this case, which in a roundabout way is why I'm interested in true crime, in a sense, because it's my norm. When I was growing up, I was very much into true crime. I was very much into the Addict, the Bueller, the Yuba, 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 the I grew up with true crime being the dinner table talk, and the best example is when I was born, my father had just recently agreed to become the research attorney for David Carpenter, who is better known as the Trailside Killer, subject matter of Robert Graysmith's phenomenal book.
So good. So good.
Yeah, and like the definitive source on it too. But anyway, he did not expect there to be a change of venue granted because such things were rarely done. They were always asked for, and they usually were outright denied, or if you were in the ring, you might get it changed to Oakland or Alameda, something like that. Instead, it was granted right after I was born, and my dad spent the first year of my life in San Diego, where the trial took place, slightly over a year, actually, which I wrote up in a feature kind of cataloging how in this very indirect way I was like had my early childhood affected by David Carpenter, who it's also interesting to note is now the oldest tenured prisoner on death row, or whatever that designation is worth.
Yeah, Zach, I've just found the article I'm linking here. Everyone, you can read.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, sure, of course. This is just one of the things that I think that attracts so many of us to certain crimes is a really either a close connection like you have, or we've taken some turns and we knew someone who sat on a bus next to someone whose dental hygienist once knew the guy that had a cousin who was in the Manson family. We have some kind of found connection to it. Kathy, do you, other than your really direct connection to the murder in your book and the subsequent lawsuits and the mayhem that surrounded all of that in your life, do you have any favorite true crime books, beloved true crime book?
Well, definitely The Fact of a Body. I thought was incredible. It's a book by a young lawyer who covered the trial of a guy who was accused of sexual assault of children, and it awoke in her memories of her own abuse as a child. And there's a whole subgenre of these books. You can find quite a few, usually written by women, where the author's gotten obsessed with the character because it speaks to their own family history. Like in my case, nobody could ever ask my parents about certain things that happened because nobody wanted, there was a family taboo against airing dirty laundry. So I think, for me, part of the reason I was so attracted to the villainess in my book was that, again, her secrets were in documents. You could actually see what was going on, and there was a way to pierce behind the veil. So I think in The Fact of a Body, there was that happening too. This the author, who's amazing, was able to just find out every little detail about these horrible assaults, and almost in investigating that, I think it gave her possibly a feeling of control over her own story in a way that she couldn't have gotten otherwise.
Along those lines, one of the books that I've come to love is I'll Be Gone in the Dark, which was written by Michelle McNamara and published posthumously. And I credit, at least in some way, it was to Kathy's point, a kind of a very personal look at her life and obsession with true crime, as well, peppered with the story of this rapist and then serial killer who killed and raped people up and down California. She passed away. The book was published. The book started as an LA Magazine article, like one of my favorite LA Mag articles. And lo and behold, months later, they catch the guy through 23andMe style. Thank you, Elena, for the link right there. 23andMe style DNA testing. They catch this guy living with a retired cop, or a one-time failed cop, living in Central California, in the Sierra foothills, now in jail. And one of the reasons that Michelle, a hobbyist kind of sleuth, was able to get so much detail is all of this information that's available. She was on these chat rooms and part of a community that tried to figure out who this guy was, and took it on really, really personally. Do you now, in either of you, try and solve, I don't know, solve your cases, try and solve cold cases, or they're cold, like the Doodler, Zach, with the Doodler, have you kind of dug deeper, gotten involved in researching who this might be? Is he still alive? Assuming it's a man.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, especially if you mention the Doodler, because I have nowhere near the body of work in this genre that Katherine does, but in the few cases I have dabbled with it, I'm totally obsessed, as you'd expect. And with the Doodler, there's a few very juicy details, again, with regards to people who were attacked by him, survived their attacks, but weren't willing to go on record with that. In one case, it was a European diplomat, and in one case, it was like a noted Hollywood celebrity. I don't know the exact phrase off the top of my head, but it's just a total rabbit hole, welcoming me to jump into, to be like, well, who was shooting a film and what part of where, at what time, when this happened? And I certainly didn't succeed, but yes, it's definitely, it has to be a little bit of your motivation if there's not an answer there, because I think if you are writing it for the right reasons, you'd want justice. And part of that goes along with you always sniffing for the right answer if it's there.
Kathy, would you ever write about true crime again? Is this a genre that, like, other than, you know, being personally connected to this case, would you ever find a cold case or a true crime story out there that excited you enough to commit a book to it?
You know, it's hard to say if maybe somebody in the audience will suggest a great story, or I'll stumble on one. But this one, I've written like 10 books, authored and co-authored, and mostly about ADHD, as I was diagnosed just before I was 50 years old. And it's become kind of a cause célèbre with me. And about the environment, I wrote a book about Imelda Marcos. But this was the book that haunted me since 1981. I actually got a contract to write the book from Simon & Schuster in 1991 after my villainess was first arrested, and I couldn't write the book. And it turned out that I really think the reason why was because it was so personal. And I couldn't write the book until I ended up writing it as a memoir and sort of figuring out my own involvement with it. So I've interviewed a lot of really scary people. This is the one person who haunted me, this, stay-at-home mother of 3. And I just don't know. I don't know if I'll find another story quite that enticing. Plus, she kind of wrote me into the story because, as you mentioned, there was this little lawsuit. Early on, while reporting on the case, I made a mistake and made it seem as if she'd actually been charged for the murder. And she sued me for $11 million. This was when she was not charged. And then about 11 years later, she was charged with the murder. So the lawsuit luckily went away, but it left its emotional punch.
You think? Yeah. How could it not? Zach, is there another case that you haven't started or that you can tell us that's inspired you enough to start working on?
Is there? I certainly confess to having gone to the website Reddit and the subreddit for true crime and, ranked it by most viewed and gone from top to bottom. I think there's another one called Unexplained Mysteries, and they have a decent amount of overlap in terms of what they cover. But Beth, you and I spoke about this at some point. There's a book called True Crime Addict that details a crime that I clearly have nothing to add to, but in terms of someone who's obsessed with a specific case, and now I, of course, want to know what happened as well because I read it. Do you remember her name? It's Mara?
The Maura Murray case.
Maura Murray, yes, thank you.
It's not West Coast, Zach. It's that happened in Vermont, so.
Yeah. So,
to Alta.
Exactly. In that case, which is just it's basically like a disappearance, and it seems like there's so little in what you find in reading that book is that all these little details come out, but are they just details of a life that existed or of a life that ended in crime? It's really hard to tell. And so I think I found a lot of cases that get me on that where I can't decide which it is.
Okay, well, if anyone's taking suggestions, I know Kathy, you are. The case that always haunted me is the case, as Blaise Zariga, managing editor of Alta, knows, because I've pitched it to him 1,000 times, is the Yuba City Five, which were 5 men from Yuba City, obviously, who went missing in 1978. They were found months later, way off their planned route, dead in the Sierras. And there are a lot of it's almost like the Dyatlov Pass incident, the Russian incident from the 1950s, a lot of really bizarre elements to the mystery. So if anyone is looking for a super bizarre, really weird, California-based mystery, check out the Yuba City Five. That's mine. Okay, we've got a question here. We're talking about true crime books. Do we have any true crime podcast recommendations?
Oh my gosh, yes.
What are yours?
I want to put in a plug for Verified. Somebody told me about this, and just one friend, I hadn't heard about it from anybody else. It's the most amazing reporting about a guy who was sexually assaulting women who came to his place in Italy on using couch surfer. And it's just this amazing reporting job. The podcast author interviews all the women, that brought cases against him, and the Italian prosecutor, and it's really gripping. It's really good.
Cool. I just shared it over here. Zach, your true crime podcast picks?
Sure. 2 picks. One is called Criminal. I would imagine a lot of folks who are into it are all over Criminal, but can't do better than that for the range of subject matter they cover, for starters, but also they're short. So sometimes we get on these podcasts that are like a whole season long and super dense, and it's nice to have something that's like 20 minutes sometimes too. The other one is called In the Dark. It has 2 seasons. They each cover a different crime. They're a Peabody Award-winning program. It's as good as reporting gets. It's like there's no higher standard for what they do, and they've made significant progress. The second season involves, the Supreme Court acted on behalf of what happened in that case. So you should definitely tune in if you haven't.
My picks for best podcast are Case File, The Vanished, and The Trail Went Cold. And I will pull links to all of those. I basically almost exclusively listen to true crime podcasts, and a little bit of news. So, yes, Elena from Books Inc. agrees. In the Dark is amazing. I've verified. I haven't listened to it, so thank you for that, Kathy. That's
love it.
All right, what about, do you, despite your Pulitzer, do you ever settle into a super cheeseball true crime docuseries on Netflix? It feels so lowbrow. Dive into those?
I am not highbrow. Peaky Blinders. I don't know if you could consider that true crime-ish. Definitely crime-ish. Have you heard of it?
I've not watched it, but I'm familiar with it.
British cult. If you start it, I think you'll get hooked very quickly.
You do Wild Wild Country. I know Zach had mentioned that. The Oregon sex cult's fascinating. Zach, do you do any true crime docuseries?
I'm always way behind on them. Like I watched Wild Wild Country 2 months ago, which I think was like a year after it was on everyone's radar. So I do, but I don't know. I guess if I have the attention span when it comes out, I catch it, but I often miss them too. That one I am so all about. And then at the same time, I also watched 3 Identical Strangers, which again is a documentary we all probably watched 5 years ago or when it came out. But if you haven't seen it, to call it true crime is as much as I am willing to spoil it. But it is a documentary about 3 people who are identical, who did not know they existed until later in their life. And what's it called? 3 Identical Strangers.
Okay.
Oh yeah. Oh, that was fantastic. Oh, I remember that. Yeah.
So those are a few, but again, they're like oldies that I just got around to.
No, that was terrific. Can I just say I really did not like the Tiger King. Did I get that name right? Yeah. Did you watch that?
I did.
I thought that was disappointing.
That is no problem.
Yeah.
I mean, addictive, no question, but it's basically reality television disguised as a documentary.
Yeah, I mean, I think as true crime experts, we can remove the Tiger King from the genre. No figures to root for in the Tiger King, right?
That's a good comment. That's absolutely right.
It's nonsense. It's not the Onion field, you know.
Yeah.
All right, so
Blinders doesn't have redeeming figures, really. I mean, they just have a very magnetic guy at the center. Anyway, go ahead.
That's how I know who it is. It has that gorgeous guy in
it. He really is. He's magnetic.
Yeah, he is.
And magnetism's a hell of a drug.
Okay.
We're already at our half. Zach called it. You said it would fly by, and it really has. Yeah. Again, I really want to thank everyone for attending. I really want to encourage you to support Books Inc. and or if it's not nearby, your favorite independent bookseller right now, go buy Kathy's book. Go buy Kathy's books. And please, if you can, subscribe. Join us as a member of Alta Magazine. We've got some really cool stuff coming up. I can't, reveal any more than that, but now is a great time to join us. $24 a year. Support Books Inc. Support Kathy Ellison. Read Zack Ruskin. And stay safe. Thank you, everyone, for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
Thank
you. Really
you.
great. Virtual hugs.
6 feet away.
Really.
And now I think we're going to disappear from your screens magically.